early morning, I to see what the Spirit was going to do. Let's We're going to go with Jesus and Adam, the first Adam versus the last Adam. The first Adam. This is Genesis, I believe, 1:26. God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let us give him dominion over all the earth, etc." That spirit that God has given the first Adam, which is mankind itself, is the power, is the very spirit of the living God that created all existence that ever was, that ever will be. Now, for us to grasp or to comprehend how large God is, it would take for His Spirit to enable us to see the layers of dimensions. We'll be able to see past the carnality, which brings the point of which is the point of Christ, the very point. Now, Jesus was there in the beginning. He is part of the Godhead. When God said, "Let us make man in our image," Jesus was a part of that. Now, we may look at Jesus as some form of, as the carnality may speak to us. We may look at him as a mortal man. Jesus is the Spirit. It's the Spirit of the living God. When Jesus was born, let's say when the angel spoke to Mary and said that she was going to have a child, she said, like, how is it possible for me to have a child when she have never known a man? She never been engaged into a man, that he have never entered her. So the Father said unto her, "I'm going to basically give you my Spirit. You're going to birth my Spirit to the world." So Jesus was formed, but he was there from the beginning. Now, through the act of the first Adam, which God has given him complete dominion. So whatever that he allows, whatever that he permits, it is going to trickle down throughout mankind, because out of one, many are. We all stem from that. Now, this one act that Adam did, God told him not to eat of he could eat of the garden wherever that he so pleased, except for one particular place. The tree of the knowledge of the good and evil. He didn't know. Now that brings forth great confusion. If is on one hand is the disobedient, and the second hand is the results of the disobedience. What comes along with it. When we do things, if God gives us order, which is to keep us or to protect us from harm, because once harm is there, hurt is right there. Hurt. Once the the soul can understand, can grasp that it can get that harm is there. It hurt is right there, and fear is going to be is right along with it. Now you're talking about a separation from God. Now we will know things that we're not supposed to know. Now we're going to try to prevent things or to secure ourselves in such a way that we shouldn't have to, because God is our spiritual refuge. But if we're separated from Him, how can He cover us? How can He protect us? So this is what brings us to Jesus, which is the last Adam. What one man failed to do, Jesus came, and how the scripture says it, through one man's offense, death came. Through one man's obedience, life came. You know, what Adam did brought forth death to mankind, but what Christ did gave us life. That we don't have to be up under that dispensation, or I'm sorry, that judgment of disobedience anymore. But it requires one degree. It requires to give up fear, which is the act of faith. And this is the battle that we all have. We all desire true love, or love itself. We all desire to be away from harm, away from hurt. We all desire to be provided for. We all desire to be with instead of being without. That comes from the coverage of God, but that's all through the stem of obedience, you know. But if we're not born again, how can we be set free from disobedience? Where's the power? Where's the access? Where's the justification? The purification? Where would it come from? This is when man feel like they can do it themselves. They could purify themselves. They could separate themselves from darkness. They could separate themselves from fear. How can you? Well, on one hand, from the person who's delivered or who is born again, they see it as it's impossible to do it without God. For the person who's not born again and the person who is not delivered or doesn't have the Spirit of Christ in them, they believe it is possible to do it without Him. And if you look at it as the two life, I mean, that is the turn of the event. If the believer is no longer believing that is possible with Jesus to be delivered from fear. If the believer decides to walk away from that, they go back into what they once was, doing it on their own. That's why humility has to be in the forefront of the believer. But this is the drive. This is what Jesus. This is what He embodied: humility. Not once did He ever boast of what He could do, because that would separate Him from the Father. The only time He was separated from the Father is when He was on the cross, and that's when He was covered with the separation from the Father. He was covered with the multitude and magnitude of sin. But in exchange, He offered us love, which was the separation, which is the separation from the spirit of fear, which came from the original sin. So, the first Adam, on one hand, through his act, and this shows the mercy of God, that He didn't give up on His creation. He didn't give up what that was made in His image and likeness. He didn't give up. He breathed into mankind, and they became a living soul. He didn't give up on them, regardless of one man's offense. Remember, He knows everything. He knew the ending from the beginning. So he it, so I'll come to close with that Jesus, to the believer, is the way, the truth, and the life, away from the spirit of fear, which has the permission to be where it's invited. That's all dimensional. That's all. It's a spiritual covering. If you see what you see, that comes to the that comes through the projection of your soul. This is why one judgment is not above all else. All else. Yeah, can I say that correctly? This is why one judgment is not above all else, because mankind is so flawed. We are so in we are so covered in brokenness or imperfection without Jesus. We just is. And I'm not saying it from a traditional or religious or uh, rituals or customs or, you know, that sort of direction or some form of institute, that Jesus, Jesus, like he's a billboard, Nah, I just, the purpose and intent of this particular video is to give the invitation that you can see him for yourself. You can get to know him for yourself to see if he's real. And here's the thing: if for any person who have ever experienced him, you can only say that he's not real if you experienced him. It's like me saying spinach is nasty if I never taste it. How can that be? That's based upon outside perception, which is flawed because there's no truth to it. There's not even I haven't even reached the shell of the fact of it until there has to be some form of evidence to so if the person is willing to see it for themselves firsthand, if they have received it from themselves for themselves firsthand, then they know the difference if he's real or not. That there's no discussion until a person is there, because it is at that point. If they never experience them for themselves, experience Jesus for themselves, then it is just customs, traditions, and so forth, religion. It is just that, because that's man's projection. You know what I'm saying? An assumption of what that form of reality is. And they can't be denied of that because that's their own free will to accept or to create that illusion. So I come to a close with that.